The massive alien ships hung in space like silver mountains. Admiral Kate Sullivan pressed her face against the viewing window of Earth's orbital station and tried not to show her fear. She had seen pictures of alien vessels before, but nothing prepared her for the real thing. The smallest ship was 10 times larger than Earth's biggest warship. "They're beautiful," whispered Captain Lisa Rodriguez, standing beside her. The young woman's dark eyes reflected the strange lights from the alien fleet. At 28, Rodriguez was Earth's best military strategist, though she had never fought a real war. Earth had been peaceful for decades. "Beautiful and terrifying," Sullivan replied. She straightened her uniform and checked her watch. "They'll be here any minute." The meeting room was simple and clean. White walls, a long table, and chairs that looked tiny compared to what was coming. Sullivan had ordered everything to look professional but not threatening. Earth wanted to join the Galactic Defense Alliance, and first impressions mattered. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The aliens walked in, and Sullivan fought the urge to step backward. They were tall, at least 8 feet high, with bodies that looked like living crystal. Light moved through them in slow waves, and their faces had multiple eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once. "I am High Assessor Velthar of the Zephyrian Collective," the lead alien said. His voice came from a small device on his chest, translating his words into English. The sound was polite but cold. "We represent 12 species of the Galactic Defense Alliance." Sullivan stood straighter. "Welcome to Earth Station 1. I am Admiral Kate Sullivan, and this is Captain Lisa Rodriguez. We're honored by your visit." Velthar's many eyes focused on her. "Honor is premature, Admiral Sullivan. We are here to evaluate whether humanity deserves membership in our alliance." The aliens sat down in specially made chairs. Their crystal bodies caught the room's light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. Sullivan noticed that Rodriguez was watching everything with intense focus, as if memorizing every detail. "Your species submitted an application for membership 6 months ago," Velthar continued. "We have studied your history, your technology, and your military capabilities. The results are concerning." "Concerning how?" Sullivan asked, keeping her voice steady. "Humans appear to lack the mental capacity for advanced tactical thinking," another alien spoke. This one had blue light flowing through his crystal body. "Your wars are simple and brutal. You rely on emotion rather than logic." Rodriguez's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Sullivan had trained her well. Velthar gestured with one long arm. "However, the alliance is fair. Every species has the right to prove themselves through the Apex combat simulation. It is the ultimate test of military strategy and tactical thinking." "What kind of test?" Sullivan asked. "A virtual reality battlefield," Velthar explained. "The simulation creates any environment, any enemy force, any tactical scenario imaginable. It learns from each attempt, becoming more complex and challenging with every battle." The blue alien leaned forward. "The current record is 14 hours and 23 minutes achieved by the Corvani on their 7th attempt. Most species require multiple tries over several years to even come close." "What makes it so difficult?" Rodriguez spoke for the first time. Velthar's eyes turned toward her. "The simulation adapts. Every move you make, every strategy you try, it learns and counters. By the end of a battle, it knows your species better than you know yourselves." The room fell quiet. Sullivan could hear the soft hum of the station's air recycling system. "Of course," Velthar continued, "our preliminary scans of human brain patterns suggest you will fail quickly. Perhaps you would be better suited for agricultural work within the Alliance. Growing food is important too." The insult was delivered so politely that it took a moment to sink in. Sullivan felt her face, flush with anger, but Rodriguez remained calm. The young captain was still watching the aliens with that intense focus. "We'd like to try the simulation," Rodriguez said quietly. "You?" The blue alien's light pulsed faster. "You are barely past childhood by your species' standards." "I'm Earth's primary military strategist," Rodriguez replied. "I've studied warfare theory for 15 years. I've read every tactical manual ever written." Velthar made a sound that might have been laughter. Reading about war is not the same as understanding it, young human. But very well. We shall prepare the simulation chamber. They moved to a different section of the station. The simulation chamber was enormous, with walls that curved up and met overhead like the inside of a giant sphere. Holographic projectors covered every surface, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with potential energy. The chamber can create any environment, Velthar explained. Desert, forest, ocean, space itself. The simulation will choose based on tactical requirements. More aliens had arrived to watch. Sullivan counted representatives from at least 6 different species. They filled an observation deck above the chamber, their various forms creating a strange alien audience. Rodriguez removed her jacket and checked her equipment. The simulation would connect directly to her nervous system, making everything feel completely real. Pain, fear, exhaustion, she would experience it all. "Are you ready?" Velthar asked. Rodriguez looked up at the observation deck, then at Sullivan. "Ready." The chamber activated with a low hum. Reality dissolved around Rodriguez, and suddenly she was standing in a vast desert. Sand dunes stretched to the horizon under a burning red sun. The air was hot and dry, and she could taste dust on her lips. A display appeared in her vision showing her forces, 10,000 soldiers with various weapons and vehicles. Her enemy had equal numbers positioned across the valley. The battle would begin in 60 seconds. Rodriguez took a deep breath and smiled. She wasn't here to win. Not yet. She was here to learn everything she could about how the simulation thought, how it learned, and how it adapted. The battle began, and Rodriguez started gathering the information that would change everything. The desert heat felt real against Rodriguez's skin. Sweat ran down her back as she studied the battlefield spread before her. 10,000 virtual soldiers waited for her commands, their faces grim and determined. Across the valley, an identical enemy force prepared for war. Rodriguez activated her command interface and began deploying her troops. She sent infantry units to secure the high ground while her armored vehicles moved to flank the enemy position. It was a textbook maneuver, something any military academy student would recognize. The enemy responded immediately. Their forces shifted to counter her flanking attempt while artillery began bombarding her advancing infantry. Rodriguez wasn't surprised. The simulation was already learning from her opening moves. She tried a different approach, pulling back her main force and sending scout units to probe for weaknesses. The enemy adapted again, repositioning their defenses and anticipating her probing attacks. Every move she made was countered within minutes. In the observation deck above, the alien representatives watched with growing satisfaction. High Assessor. Velthar's crystal body pulsed with slow, steady light, a sign of calm confidence among his people. "Predictable," commented the blue alien. "Human tactics are crude but follow recognizable patterns. The simulation will have this cataloged within the hour." Admiral Sullivan gripped the railing of the observation deck. She wanted to shout advice to Rodriguez, but the rules forbade any outside communication during the test. The young captain was on her own. Rodriguez continued fighting for 37 minutes. She tried every tactical approach she knew: direct assault, defensive positioning, guerrilla warfare, siege tactics. Each time, the simulation learned and adapted faster than before. Her forces dwindled steadily as the enemy countered her every strategy. But Rodriguez wasn't frustrated. If anything, she seemed more focused with each passing minute. Her eyes moved constantly, studying not just the battlefield, but the way the simulation itself responded to her actions. She was fighting 2 wars, one against the enemy army and another against the artificial intelligence controlling it. When her last soldier fell, the simulation ended. The desert faded away, and Rodriguez found herself back in the empty chamber. Her clothes were soaked with sweat, and her hands shook slightly from the adrenaline. "As expected," Velthar said as Rodriguez emerged from the chamber. "The simulation has now incorporated human tactical patterns into its defensive matrix. Your species' limitations are part of its database." Rodriguez nodded calmly. "I request a second attempt." The aliens exchanged glances. Most species took months to analyze their failures before attempting the simulation again. The Corvani had spent 2 years studying their first defeat before trying again. "You wish to attempt immediately?" asked the blue alien. "Your neural patterns show significant stress from the first battle." "I'm fine," Rodriguez replied. She looked refreshed despite the sweat on her forehead. "The simulation learns from each attempt, correct? So waiting won't help. I need to try again while the data is fresh." Colonel Jake Morrison appeared on a holographic display from Earth's military command center. His weathered face showed concern as he reviewed Rodriguez's biological data from the first battle. "Lisa's heart rate never went above normal exercise levels," he reported to Sullivan. "Blood pressure remained steady throughout the engagement. Either she has incredible stress control or she wasn't really trying to win," Sullivan finished quietly. Morrison nodded. "Her brain activity patterns suggest she was analyzing rather than strategizing. She was studying the simulation, not fighting it." The aliens agreed to a second attempt after a 12-hour rest period. Rodriguez spent the time reviewing data recordings of her first battle, but not in the way the aliens expected. She wasn't looking at her tactical failures. She was studying the simulation's responses. "What did you learn?" Sullivan asked during a private briefing. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic display showing the battle timeline. "The simulation thinks like a computer because it is a computer. It processes information, identifies patterns, and generates responses based on probability matrices." She highlighted several moments from the battle. "Look here. Every time I changed tactics, there was a 2.3-second delay before the enemy responded. That's processing time. The simulation has to analyze my new approach, run it through its database of known tactics, and calculate the optimal counter-strategy." "That's still incredibly fast," Morrison pointed out. "Fast, but predictable," Rodriguez replied. "It always chooses the mathematically optimal response. It never takes risks or makes intuitive leaps. It's logical to a fault." She turned to face Sullivan and Morrison. "The simulation has learned from 12 different alien species, but they all think the same way, logically, systematically, predictably. They approach warfare like a math problem to be solved." "And humans don't?" Sullivan asked. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since the aliens arrived. "Humans are chaotic. We make intuitive leaps, take calculated risks, and sometimes do things that make no logical sense, but somehow work anyway. The simulation has never encountered truly unpredictable behavior." When the second attempt began, Rodriguez entered the same desert battlefield. The alien observers expected a slightly improved performance, perhaps lasting an hour before inevitable defeat. The simulation, now loaded with human tactical data, should be even more prepared. Rodriguez surprised everyone by immediately ordering a full retreat. Her entire army pulled back to defensive positions without engaging the enemy. The simulation paused, confused by this unexpected opening. While the enemy forces advanced cautiously, Rodriguez launched a series of seemingly random attacks. She would strike at empty terrain, abandon strategic positions for no apparent reason, and sacrifice valuable units in meaningless skirmishes. To the watching aliens, she appeared to be having some kind of breakdown. Her tactics made no sense, following no recognizable military doctrine, but Morrison understood what was happening. "She's being deliberately irrational," he explained to Sullivan. "She's not trying to win, she's trying to confuse the simulation." The strategy worked. The simulation struggled to categorize Rodriguez's behavior. Every time it began to model her actions, she would shift to something completely different. She was being creatively chaotic in ways that no logical system could predict or counter. At 43 minutes, something unprecedented happened. The simulation began making mistakes. Overloaded with contradictory data about human behavior, it started misallocating resources and making tactical errors. Rodriguez lost the second battle, but only barely. Her forces were reduced to a few hundred soldiers when the simulation finally adapted to her chaos strategy. In the observation deck, the aliens were deeply troubled. The simulation should have been more effective after learning from the first encounter, not less effective. "One more attempt," Rodriguez requested as she emerged from the chamber. "Give me 24 hours to prepare." Velthar's multiple eyes dimmed with concern. Something was happening that had never happened before in the simulation's 1,000-year history. The humans were breaking patterns that should have been unbreakable, and Rodriguez was just getting started. Rodriguez spent the next 24 hours in the strangest strategy meeting of her career. The conference room on Earth Station 1 was filled with people who had never been in a military briefing before. Captain Ben Williams, Earth's youngest, fleet commander at 24, sat next to Dr. Amy Carter, a cognitive psychologist who studied human creativity. Across from them, Lieutenant Sarah Blake, a former dance instructor turned military engineer, compared notes with Professor Mike Davis, who taught music theory at the academy. "I still don't understand why you need us," said Dr. Carter, adjusting her glasses nervously. "I study how people solve puzzles and create art. This is warfare." Rodriguez leaned forward across the table. "That's exactly why I need you. The simulation expects warfare. It's been studying military tactics for 1,000 years across 12 different species. But what if we don't give it warfare?" "What do you mean?" asked Williams. "The simulation learns by categorizing behavior into predictable patterns," Rodriguez explained. "Every species it has faced approaches problems logically. They see a military situation and respond with military solutions. But what if we respond with something completely different?" Lieutenant Blake raised her hand tentatively. "In dance, we call it improvisation. When you stop following choreography and just move with the music, it creates something beautiful that never existed before." "Exactly," Rodriguez said. "The simulation can't prepare for something that has never existed." Professor Davis nodded slowly. "In jazz music, we have a concept called controlled chaos. Musicians follow basic structures but improvise within them. The result is organized, but unpredictable." "Can you apply that to military tactics?" Rodriguez asked. "Everything has rhythm," Davis replied. "Marching, combat, even strategy. If we could create military movements that follow artistic patterns instead of tactical ones." The conversation continued for hours. Rodriguez wasn't building a traditional battle plan. She was creating something entirely new. A fusion of military, strategy, and human creativity that no computer could anticipate. Admiral Sullivan watched from the corner of the room, fascinated and worried. "Lisa, this is incredibly risky. If this fails, humanity loses its chance to join the Alliance. If we fight the simulation the way it expects, we'll definitely lose," Rodriguez replied. "Every other species has tried logical warfare and failed. We need to do something no one has ever done before." By the end of the planning session, Rodriguez had something that couldn't be called a battle plan. It was part military strategy, part artistic performance, and part controlled experiment. The team had created tactical movements based on dance choreography, communication patterns inspired by jazz improvisation, and decision-making processes that combined logic with pure intuition. "This is either brilliant or completely insane," Williams said as they reviewed the final approach. "Maybe both," Rodriguez admitted, "but that's what makes it human." When the time came for her third attempt, word had spread throughout the station. Human personnel who weren't normally allowed in the observation areas had been given special permission to watch. Earth's future hung on what happened in the next hour. The alien representatives filled their section of the observation deck, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. High Assessor Velthar stood at the front, his crystal body pulsing with nervous energy. "This is unprecedented," he said to Admiral Sullivan. "No species has ever required 3 attempts on the same day. Usually, multiple failures indicate fundamental limitations in tactical thinking. Humans don't give up easily," Sullivan replied. Rodriguez entered the simulation chamber for the 3rd time. She carried no weapons data, no tactical manuals, no traditional military planning. Instead, she carried something far more dangerous. To an algorithmic opponent, pure human creativity refined into a weapon. The familiar desert materialized around her. Sand, sun, and heat. 10,000 soldiers awaiting orders. The enemy force positioned across the valley, ready for another conventional battle. Rodriguez took a deep breath and smiled. Execute pattern jazz. Her army began to dance, not random, movement but actual choreographed dancing based on patterns that Lieutenant Blake had developed. The soldiers moved in flowing formations that combined ballet, traditional folk dances from every human culture, and modern interpretive movement. In the observation deck, the aliens fell silent. Several of them made sounds that their translators couldn't convert to any known language. The simulation froze. For 15 seconds, nothing happened. The enemy forces remained motionless as the artificial intelligence struggled to process what it was seeing. No military database in existence contained protocols for responding to an army that moved in artistic patterns. The simulation had no framework for categorizing organized dance as a military tactic. While the simulation struggled to understand the dancing, Rodriguez implemented the real attack. Her units weren't just dancing. They were using the artistic movements as cover for a completely different kind of warfare. Hidden within the choreography were actual tactical maneuvers, but ones that followed no recognizable military doctrine. Soldiers would pirouette into flanking positions, leap into strategic formations, and flow like water around enemy strongpoints. The simulation tried to adapt, but every time it began to recognize a pattern, the pattern would shift into something completely different. Rodriguez's forces fought like a jazz ensemble, improvising and responding to each other in ways that created complex, beautiful, and utterly unpredictable battle rhythms. Traditional military formations became artistic expressions. Supply lines moved like flowing rivers. Artillery strikes followed musical timing rather than tactical necessity. The entire battle became a performance that happened to involve warfare. "What is she doing?" whispered the blue alien. "She's redefining the very concept of battle," Admiral Sullivan replied, unable to hide her amazement. In the simulation, Rodriguez's forces had surrounded the enemy without the simulation realizing it was happening. The artistic movements had masked a pincer maneuver so complex and creative that no computer could have predicted it. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. As her forces closed in for the final assault, she implemented the most human element of all: pure emotional intuition. Instead of ordering a standard attack, she had her soldiers sing. 10,000 voices rose in harmony, performing a song that Professor Davis had composed specifically for this moment. It was a victory song, a battle cry, and a work of art all at once. The simulation's final defenses crumbled, not because they were overwhelmed by superior firepower, but because they were facing something that had never existed in any military database: warfare as art, battle as beauty, destruction as creative expression. 38 seconds after the battle began, Rodriguez's forces had completely dismantled the enemy army. The simulation ended not with the usual countdown timer, but with a system error message. The observation deck was completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's machinery seemed muted. High Assessor Velthar's crystal body had gone completely transparent, a sign of utter shock among his people. "Query the simulation for a tactical analysis," he said to his aide. After several minutes, the aide responded. "The simulation cannot provide analysis. It reports that no recognizable military engagement occurred." Rodriguez emerged from the chamber, breathing hard but smiling broadly. She had just changed the course of galactic history, and she knew it. "How?" was all Velthar could say. "We stopped fighting the simulation," Rodriguez replied. "We started dancing with it." The silence in the observation deck stretched for a full minute. Alien representatives from 12 different species stared at the simulation chamber where Rodriguez stood, still catching her breath from her impossible victory. High Assessor Veltar was the first to speak. His crystal body flickered between transparent and opaque as his internal systems struggled to process what had happened. "Run the analysis again," he commanded his aide. "I have run it 17 times," the aide replied, his own crystalline form showing stress patterns. The simulation's conclusion remains the same. No military engagement occurred. According to its database, Captain Rodriguez's forces performed an elaborate artistic display that somehow resulted in the complete destruction of enemy units. "That's impossible," said the blue alien, whose name was revealed to be Subassessor Krell. "Artistic displays cannot defeat military forces. The simulation must be malfunctioning." Admiral Sullivan stepped forward from the human section of the observation deck. Maybe the problem isn't with the simulation. Maybe the problem is with your understanding of what warfare can be. Rodriguez had joined them in the observation area, still wearing her sweat-stained uniform from the chamber. Her dark hair was messy, and her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline, but her eyes were bright with excitement. The simulation worked perfectly, she said to the assembled aliens. It did exactly what it was designed to do: learn from military engagements and develop counter-strategies. But we didn't give it a military engagement. You destroyed an army in 38 seconds, Krell protested. How is that not military? Rodriguez walked to the central display and activated a holographic replay of her battle. The aliens watched, again as her forces began their impossible dance, flowing around the battlefield like water, music, and art made manifest. This is warfare, she said, pointing to traditional human battles from Earth's history. Organized violence with predictable patterns, logical objectives, and measurable outcomes. Your simulation mastered this completely. She switched to her own battle. This is something else entirely. This is warfare as creative expression. We turned battle into art, strategy into dance, violence into beauty. The simulation couldn't counter it because it exists outside the very concept of military engagement. Dr. Amy Carter, who had been watching from the human section, approached the group. In psychology, we call this paradigm shifting. Captain, Rodriguez didn't solve the simulation's puzzle. She redefined what the puzzle could be. Felthar's multiple eyes focused on the doctor. Explain. Every species you've tested approached the simulation as a military problem requiring a military solution, Carter said. But humans don't think that way. We see problems as opportunities for creativity. When faced with an impossible military challenge, we ask, what if this wasn't a military challenge at all? Professor Mike Davis joined the discussion, his Earth Academy uniform looking simple among the elaborate alien forms. In music, we have a concept called playing outside the changes. It means improvising beyond the established harmonic structure to create something entirely new. That's what Captain Rodriguez did. She played outside the changes of warfare itself. The alien representatives exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of lights, sounds, and energy patterns that the human translators couldn't fully interpret. Finally, a new alien spoke, one who had remained silent throughout the previous discussions. This being was different from the others, with a form that seemed to shift between solid and energy states. I am Prime Strategist Zhern of the Corvani Hegemony, the newcomer said. My species holds the previous record for the Apex simulation. 14 hours and 23 minutes of brutal grinding warfare against an enemy that learned our every tactic. Zhern's form solidified slightly. We achieved victory through perfect military discipline, flawless tactical execution, and superior strategic thinking. It required 7 attempts over 3 years and cost the lives of our finest military minds. Even in simulation, the stress was enormous. The alien paused, studying the replay of Rodriguez's battle. What you accomplished defies everything we understand about warfare, strategy, and tactical thinking. By our calculations, what you did should have resulted in immediate and total defeat. But it didn't, Rodriguez said simply. No, Zhern admitted. It did not, and that fact has implications far beyond this simulation. Felthar stepped forward, his crystal body now pulsing with urgent energy. Prime Strategist Zhern speaks of matters classified at the highest levels of Alliance security. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Admiral Sullivan said firmly. If this affects humanity's membership in the Alliance, we have a right to know everything. A long moment passed. Finally, Zhern made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. There is an enemy, Zhern said quietly, beyond our borders, pressing against our defenses for over 50 years. We call them the Devourers. Holographic displays activated around the observation deck, showing star maps marked with red zones indicating Devourer territory. The infected area was enormous, covering nearly a quarter of the known galaxy. The Devourers fight unlike any enemy we have ever faced, Zhern continued. Their tactics are chaotic, unpredictable, seemingly random. They appear to have no strategy, no organization, no logical objectives, yet they win. Every Alliance species has tried to fight them, Krell added. The Zephyrians with our crystalline logic, the Corvani with their perfect discipline, the Thyrenians with their quantum computing minds. All have failed. Rodriguez studied the star maps with growing understanding. They fight like humans. Worse than humans, Zern corrected. They fight with pure chaos, no creativity to give it structure. But the result is the same. Our logical, predictable strategies cannot counter their unpredictable attacks. Velthar's form brightened. For 50 years we have sought a species that could match the Devourer's chaotic tactics. We have tested thousands of civilizations hoping to find minds that think outside logical parameters. And now you have, Rodriguez said. Now we have, Velthar confirmed. Humanity doesn't just think outside logical parameters. You have weaponized creativity itself. You have turned unpredictability into art and art into warfare. Admiral Sullivan felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. You're asking us to fight a war. We are asking you to save the galaxy, Zern replied, simply. The observation deck fell silent again as the implications sank in. Humanity had come seeking membership in a peaceful alliance and discovered they were being recruited as the galaxy's last hope against an enemy that had defied every conventional strategy. Rodriguez looked at the star maps, at the red zones marking Devourer territory, at the faces of alien species who had fought and failed for 50 years. When do we start? She asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Earth's small, peaceful planet was about to become the center of the largest military campaign in galactic history. And it all started with a 38-second dance that broke every rule of warfare ever written. Immediately, Velthar said, the Devourers have launched a new offensive. Our outer defense lines are failing. You have perhaps 6 months to prepare before they reach core Alliance territory. Rodriguez smiled the same calm smile she had worn throughout her 3 battles. With the simulation, then we'd better get creative. In that moment, the galaxy's last hope rested in humanity's greatest strength, their ability to turn impossible problems into artistic opportunities, to find beauty in chaos, and to dance their way to victory against any enemy, no matter how impossible the odds. 6 months later, Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Innovation, humanity's first interstellar warship. The vessel itself was a work of art. Its hull curved and flowed like a sculpture, its weapon systems integrated so seamlessly that they looked like decorative elements. Even humanity's approach to ship design had confused Alliance engineers. Approaching the Kepler defense line, reported Captain Ben Williams from the navigation station. At 25, he had adapted to Space Command with the same creative flexibility that had made him valuable in Rodriguez's original planning sessions. Through the main view screen, Rodriguez could see the Alliance fleet. Hundreds of ships from a dozen different species, all following traditional military formations, geometric patterns that spoke of logical, predictable thinking. Alliance Command. This is Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Innovation. She spoke into the communication system. Human forces are ready to engage. The response came from Prime Strategist Zern of the Corvani. Admiral Rodriguez, we have reports of Devourer advanced scouts in Sector 7. Recommend standard defensive positioning according to Tactical Manual Epsilon 7. Rodriguez smiled. Negative, Command. We'll be using Pattern Symphony today. Pause. Pattern Symphony is not in any Alliance tactical database. That's the point, Rodriguez replied. Behind the Innovation came Earth's entire fleet, 50 ships of various sizes, each one designed with the same flowing artistic principles. But more importantly, each ship carried human crews trained in the new warfare that Rodriguez had developed. For 6 months, Earth had become the strangest military academy in galactic history. Alliance officers came to learn from human instructors who taught tactics through dance, strategy through music, and combat coordination through improvisation. Lieutenant Sarah Blake, now promoted to colonel, had established the Academy of Creative Warfare. Her students learned to move ships like dancers, to fight in formations that followed musical rhythms rather than geometric logic. Professor Mike Davis, wearing a military uniform that still looked strange on his academic frame, had developed communication protocols based on jazz improvisation. Fleets could now coordinate attacks through musical cues that enemy forces couldn't predict or intercept. Dr. Amy Carter had become Earth's premier expert on xenopsychology, helping human commanders understand how different alien species thought, so they could develop personalized creative tactics for each alliance member. Contact, reported the Innovation Sensor Officer. Multiple Devourer vessels emerging from hyperspace. Configuration, unknown. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The enemy ships appeared in random clusters with no apparent organization. Some were massive dreadnoughts, others looked like converted civilian vessels. There was no logic to their formation, no strategic positioning. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Ma'am?" Williams asked. "They're not random," Rodriguez realized. "They're expressing something. Look at the way they move. It's like abstract art in 3 dimensions." The Devourer fleet began its attack, and immediately the Alliance forces found themselves in trouble. Traditional defensive formations crumbled as the enemy ships attacked from impossible angles, ignored tactical priorities, and seemed to make decisions based on no logic whatsoever. "Alliance fleet is requesting assistance," reported the communications. Officer Rodriguez activated the fleet-wide channel. "All human vessels execute pattern symphony. Remember, we're not fighting a war. We're having a conversation." The Innovation began to move, not in straight lines toward strategic positions, but in flowing curves that mirrored the enemy's abstract patterns. The rest of the human fleet followed, their ships dancing through space in formations that looked more like a performance than a military maneuver. The Devourers noticed immediately. Their chaotic attacks paused as they studied this new opponent that seemed to understand their strange language of movement and violence. "They're responding," Rodriguez said with excitement. "The Devourers aren't just attacking, they're trying to communicate through combat. They're an artistic species using warfare as expression." She opened a channel to the lead Devourer vessel. Instead of demanding surrender or issuing threats, she did something unprecedented in galactic warfare. She tried to start a conversation. "This is Admiral Rodriguez of Earth," she transmitted. "Your formations are beautiful. We'd like to join the dance." The response came not in words, but in movement. The Devourer ships shifted into a new pattern, still chaotic, but with underlying themes that Rodriguez began to recognize. "Colonel Blake," she called to her former dance instructor. "Analyze their movement patterns. What are they trying to say?" Blake studied the tactical display with artist's eyes rather than military training. "It's aggressive, but there's something else. Desperation? Fear? They're trying to express something they can't put into words." Rodriguez made a decision that would have gotten any other admiral court-martialed. Instead of attacking, she ordered her fleet to mirror the Devourer movements, matching their artistic aggression with creative responses. The space battle became something unique in galactic history. A dialogue through dance, a conversation through combat maneuvers that slowly revealed the truth about the mysterious Devourers. "They're not invaders," Rodriguez realized after 30 minutes of this impossible ballet. "They're refugees." The revelation changed everything. Through movement and formation, through the language of space combat turned into art, the Devourers had been trying to communicate that they were fleeing something even worse, an enemy that had destroyed their homeworlds and forced them into nomadic existence. Their attacks on Alliance territory weren't conquest. They were desperate attempts to find sanctuary, expressed through the only language they had left after their civilization was destroyed. "Innovation to all Alliance vessels," Rodriguez broadcast. "Cease defensive operations. The Devourers are not our enemy." Admiral Rodriguez, Prime Strategist Zern's voice crackled through communications. "What are you doing? They have been killing our people for 50 years. "They've been trying to tell us something for 50 years, Rodriguez corrected, "and we never learned to listen." The space around the Kepler defense line had become surreal. Human and Devourer vessels moved together in formations that defied every principle of military engagement, while Alliance ships hung back in confusion. Through careful positioning and creative maneuvering, Rodriguez managed to establish true communication with the Devourer fleet. Their leader, speaking through a translator that struggled with concepts that had no logical equivalence, told the story of their people. They had been artists, musicians, dancers, an entire civilization built around creative expression. When the true enemy came, beings of pure logic that sought to eliminate all chaotic thinking from the galaxy, the Devourers had fled, their culture destroyed but their artistic spirits intact. "We attack because attack is movement," the Devourer leader explained through tortured translation. "Movement is life. To be still is to be dead like homeworld." Rodriguez understood. The Devourers had been using warfare as art therapy, expressing their grief and maintaining their cultural identity through the only medium they had left, combat. "We can teach you other ways to move," Rodriguez offered. "Other ways to express. You don't have to fight to stay alive." The negotiation that followed lasted hours and involved choreographed fleet movements that would have looked like madness to any observer who didn't understand that they were watching the birth of a new form of diplomacy. When it ended, the galaxy had gained not just peace, but something far more valuable, a new understanding of what intelligence could be. The Alliance expanded to include not just logical species but creative ones. Earth became the diplomatic center for a new kind of galactic civilization that valued artistic expression alongside scientific achievement. Admiral Rodriguez, now commanding the Alliance's cultural defense fleet, stood in her ready room aboard the Innovation and looked out at a galaxy that had learned to dance. Reports came in daily of former enemies becoming allies through creative engagement, of diplomatic solutions found through artistic collaboration, of problems solved not through logic but through imagination. The simulation that had once seemed impossible to beat now seemed quaint, a relic of an age when beings thought there was only one way to approach any problem. Humanity had joined the galactic community not as junior members seeking approval, but as teachers showing the universe that the greatest strength was not in being logical or powerful, but in being creatively, impossibly, beautifully human. And it all started with a 38-second dance that changed everything.